Let me welcome everyone to the July 14th Caucus of African American Leaders meeting. Tonight we have a special program. We are going to be designating most of the evening to honoring young people. And you'll be hearing a lot more from our elected officials about how proud we are of our youth who in the last 5 weeks have demonstrated what young people can do to help change America. I'm going to ask people to take a moment of silence in memory of the men and women who in 1963 were part of the March on Washington, D.C. So we can have a moment of silence in the memory of those foot soldiers who marched in 1963. Thank you. One of the oldest, largest civil rights organization in the world is the NAACP. The NAACP was founded in 1909, but the first chapter of the NAACP was founded here in Anne Arundel County in 1944. It's an organization that has been in the forefront of the civil rights movement, and it's an organization that has made a difference. Please join me in welcome to the podium to bring the official welcome, Jackie Awesome, President of the NAACP.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. As President of the Anne Arundel County branch of the NAACP, I welcome you to the special meeting of the Caucus of African American Leaders. This evening, we will recognize and celebrate several individuals who have and are standing up for racial justice. They have met the moral challenges of today and have moved to create a change. These young people have organized protests, have planned actions, have planned programs for action, have met with elected officials to discuss issues that are facing our county. The success of these young leaders here this evening can shape our world, and they will grow both personally and professionally. They have vision, energy, drive, and conviction. The Anne Arundel County NAACP branch has a youth and college division. Its mission is committed to training, strategically, and molding young leaders. The mission of the Youth and College Division is to inform the youth of problems that are affecting African Americans and other racial and ethnic minorities. Also to advance economic, education, social, political status of African Americans and other racial ethnic minorities. Also to stimulate an appreciation of the African diaspora and other people of color that have contributed to this civilization. Two of the individuals that will be recognized for their leadership this evening are past presidents of the Anne Arundel County Youth and College Division. Those two youth are Alderman DeJuan Gay and School Board Member Drake Smith. For all the youth who are here this evening, For all the youth who may be watching us on Zoom, I invite you to become a member of the Youth and College Division. It's very easy. All you have to do is go onto our website and complete the application. In the words of our national president, we are done dying. We are done dying. When we fight, we win. Thank you.
One of the great challenges that are facing us in this nation, how do we address the issues of the past? How do we move forward with a vision that will bring America together and begin to solve the problems that we all know that exist in this nation? These are very serious times, and these are perilous times. And never before we needed leaders with vision, leaders who begin to look at how we address the systemic problems facing this nation, where people, regardless of their zip code, their income, or their religion, or their color, is able to advance in this society. Never before have we needed leaders with a vision. It was the late President John F. Kennedy that asked or made the statement, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." Our next speaker is a woman who's committed to addressing the systemic issues that are facing our community. In a moment, she'll be reading a resolution which we would like to put before the body to take an official vote. Please welcome to the podium the Honorable Shanika Henson, delegate from District 30.
Thank you, Carl. I want to commend all of the youth leaders who are being acknowledged today. I remember when I first started my journey in public service, I considered myself really young, and then an opponent filed to run against me named Dewan Gay, and he was 19. And so I thought, well, so much for that. But I want to commend you all on your leadership and on your service to the community already. I know there's a number of things that compete for your time when you are a young person, and you guys have already made tremendous sacrifices and shown great fortitude and sticking to making sure that we all see change and we all see justice. So thank you so much, youth leaders. I want to thank Carl and the Caucus of African American Leaders for giving me an opportunity to read this resolution and to petition you for your support. What I'm asking for is a policy document. The policy document acknowledges the harmful impacts of racism as a public health trauma to African Americans. We all know full well some of the very harmful health outcomes that we see. African Americans being 80% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes, Black women being 40% more likely to die from breast cancer, Black children being twice as likely to be diagnosed with asthma. We just had a very beautiful ceremony on the People's Park, as it's titled now, where we acknowledge the families whose legacy, whose livelihood was swept away. But what we don't often do after we acknowledge things is make them right, is repair them and make them whole. So this policy is a next step that would rehabilitate the harmful impacts of racism. So if I may read this, it says, whereas the Caucus of African American Leaders of Anne Arundel County is an organization driven by progressive ideas, bold actions, and strong community support. When an initiative is found to be in the best interest of African Americans, the Caucus of African American Leaders may make an endorsement with the affirmation of a resolution in support. Whereas Maryland lawmaker and attorney Delegate Shanika Henson of the Maryland House of Delegates introduced a policy initiative on July 7, 2020, Racism Acknowledged as a Public Health Trauma Entitlement Response System. The policy asks for 28 entitlements and civil rights protections afforded to persons with disabilities, and those similar protections to be afforded to African Americans. Henson's policy initiatives call for the injurious racial discrimination as detailed in 6 biomedical studies cited in the policy to be recognized as a disability upon the race. Henson's policy proposes treating and rehabilitating the harmful impacts of racial discrimination through an expansion of the current disability, entitlement, and civil rights benefits. Now therefore be it resolved that the Caucus of African American Leaders of Anne Arundel County hereby endorses Racism Acknowledged as a Public Health Trauma Entitlement Response, having been released July 7. In support thereof, we will provide advocacy, so this is what we're asking everyone to do. We will provide advocacy to support introduction, passage, and implementation of the policy before Congress and the executive branch of the United States government. That is my ask of you today. Thank you.
We need a motion from the audience to accept the policy statement that was just made by Delegate Henson. Is there a motion? Is there a second? It's been properly moved in second. All those in favor signify by standing on your feet. This is for the people who visually can't hear, but they can see you standing. Thank you so very much. Let's give Shanika a round of applause. Before I bring on our next speaker, I want to make sure that he can be heard. So I'm going to turn to my sound people as we get this started by doing acknowledgments. Hopefully when you give me the sign that it's okay to bring the next speaker up, we'll do so. But as part of the acknowledgement, I want to thank Vicki Bruce, who's with the Arundel Patriot. I want to also obviously thank the Anne Arundel County Recreation and Parks. We want to thank the Anne Arundel County Health Department. And I want to give a special shout out to James Kitchen, Mr. County Executive. He's done a marvelous job in helping to organize this event, and I want to acknowledge him and his staff for the work that they've done. Also, I want to take this opportunity to thank Kevin Simmons, who's helped us with this social distance. I want to acknowledge in the audience our police chief, Chief Jackson. Would you please stand and let's acknowledge Chief Ed Jackson, Annapolis Police Department. I want to acknowledge the mayor's staff, and there are a number of people here. With the mayor's staff, people stand: Lynn Farrell and Will Rao, and Mitchell should be here somewhere as well. We want to acknowledge them and the good work the city is doing. We want to take this opportunity to also to acknowledge the parents of our young people. Let's give them a round of applause, the parents. We're now at that part of the program that I wanted to make sure that people could hear. Because there are a lot of people who, like I, admire what young people are doing. And I can't tell you the number of calls that I got from people who said they wish they could be here in person. And they knew they couldn't, so they wanted to make sure it was on Facebook and Zoom, because they too wanted to be a part of the celebration of what young people have done and are doing in our county and all over the nation. One of the individuals that I've seen just time after time again, whether it was in Annapolis or in Edgewater or in Pasadena or Glen Burnie or Severn, wherever young people were gathering, sometimes by the hundreds, there was an elected official at each one of those events, encouraging them, supporting them, and marching with them. Please join me and welcome to the podium our County Executive Steuart Pittman.
I remember the press conference that we did a few days after the killing of George Floyd with about 8 or 9, maybe 10 local African American leaders, and most of whom may be here. Many of you are here. And at least half of them got up at the microphone and said, we need to hear from young people. And then that gave me the idea that I ought to do a town hall with exclusively young Anne Arundel County African American residents. We did that. I learned a lot. And right around that time, we started seeing these protests popping up all over the county in places where nobody had ever gone out in the streets for anything other than to cross the street. In Crofton and in Pasadena, Severn and Annapolis and Edgewater, Glen Burnie, everywhere, all over the county. And I think just about every one of them was organized by somebody who was under 25 years of age. And it just turned out that way. It just happened that way. I don't have a real answer. If you read the paper this morning, you probably saw Carl Snowden's, I think it was this morning, column speculating that some of it might have to do with the fact that this is a generation that grew up under Barack and Michelle Obama as their president and first lady, and they have pretty high standards for what leadership can be. And they're pretty upset about the leadership that we have now, and people are frustrated. And when they see injustice, they go out in the street now and they say that's enough, and we're going to make change. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because of the young people that are here. And I've gone through the list. I went through it with Carl and James and made sure that the people I knew had been organized and were on that list. And I don't know all of you. I'd say I probably know 2/3 of you, and the ones I don't know, I plan to get to know. I'm sure you'll make sure you get to know me, because you're not giving up. And I'm the guy up in that 4th floor who you need to be talking to. The other thing I want to say is that Shanika focused on racism as a public health issue. And I got an email just a few days ago from our health officer, Dr. Kalia Buchanan, with a link to an article in the American Public Health Association's newsletter, I guess it was, identified Anne Arundel County as one of the 4 jurisdictions in the United States, one of the first 4, maybe it was 4th in the list, that declared racism a public health issue. And he didn't send it to me to brag. He sent it to me to tell me his message was, all right, now we've done the talking, now it's time to get something done. Making a declaration is one thing. That doesn't check off the box. And so we know from the history of this county, from the history that we were just talking about when we dedicated this park to the residents of the old 4th Ward and called it People's Park, where we have our lynchings memorial, where we have our foot soldiers memorial, where I get to look out of that 4th floor window and am reminded what it means to be People's Park and the people who live right here on this block. Because of the history, that's why we know we have a lot of work, and that it's hard work, and there's resistance to the hard work. And so I'm proud of the staff at Anne Arundel County government. The people are stepping up, and we probably have a dozen different initiatives going on right now dealing with structural racism. And it's all over what we're doing in county government. Whether we're successful, how much change we make, that's partly up to you. So I'm committed. I know you all are committed. And the thing that really does give me the greatest hope as I look around here is that so many of you who are doing the hardest work and getting people to really show up on the streets are under the age of about 25 years old. So our future looks good. Thank you.
Let's give the county executive another round of applause. These are interesting times we live in, and if you just pay attention This gives me a chance to plug my book. Some people watch clocks. I watch people to know what time it is. People just pay attention. They begin to see certain things occurring. Remember the man named Colin Kapernick, the football player? Did anybody remember when he first took the knee? The controversy that generated all over America? There were people who were saying that this professional football player who was trying to call attention to the issues of police brutality and injustice was wrong. And in a very short period of time, the NFL admitted that they were wrong on that issue. Things are changing rapidly in our nation, and I'm one who pays attention. I heard a man who owned a football team say he would never change the name of that football team in Washington, D.C. if people just pay attention. These changes are not happening by accident. As young people mobilize and organize and energize our community, they affect all of us. And there was this wonderful photograph. When I saw it, I immediately thought of Colin Kaepernick. It showed a public official, two of them, kneeling. And in kneeling, they became part of a worldwide movement that calling for social justice. Please welcome to the podium one of those public officials who kneeled and became part of the movement, the Honorable Gavin Buckley, Mayor of the City of Annapolis.
So we're honouring young people here tonight, and before urban removal, this place was one of the coolest places in the planet. This place was a place where the Dixie Hotel, the West Washington Hotel, this is a place where Sarah Vaughan, Billie Holiday, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, they stayed here when they played at Cars Beach and hotels were segregated. But this was the jumping community. Your grandparents loved this place because cool things happened here. The Jay-Z of his day used to come here all the time and celebrate this community because it was so happening. And this generation are making it relevant again. So I want to thank the caucus meeting for letting me be here tonight. In the time before COVID, the caucus regularly came to City Hall to discuss and bring to light issues of importance to the African American community in Annapolis. I've tried to be a willing listener, an active listener, and I've worked to be a doer, to make decisions on behalf of city government that reflect the commitment to racial equity, to ensuring diversity, to righting wrongs of the past, and moving our city forward. Earlier tonight, County Executive Steuart Pittman rededicated the park here as People's Park. It's appropriate because this land, in my lifetime, so not part of the long past Annapolis history, this land was taken from African Americans, taken to make room for Annapolis to be a county seat for Anne Arundel County. That was in 1968. Some may want to quibble when taken, and that's fine to do, but because this land was technically sold to the county, the homes were raised and the garage and this park put in its place. But make no mistake, this park was named for the man who put this plan in place. And those sales were under threat of seizure under the rules of eminent domain. Which brings me to a line from Hamilton. History is happening in Manhattan, and we just happen to be in the greatest city in the world. Well, history was happening in the late 1960s when John Whitmore decided to take that land for his garage and his burgeoning new county workforce. History is happening today when we rededicate that park as People's Park. History will continue to happen in Annapolis, where our young people have given heart and energy and a fresh voice to our community's fight for racial equity as part of this community's Black Lives Matter movement. Tonight, we recognize these young people. They are bringing a fresh voice to an ongoing conversation about race, equity, and diversity and justice. Their activism, and specifically their recent work around Black Lives Matter, is awe-inspiring. I feel honored to be part of this history. We all want to be part of something that is bigger than ourselves. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm glad that they have included me. Their efforts bring awareness and shine a light on an issue that will move our community forward. I'm grateful for your activism, your voices, and your commitment. Thank you for letting me be here. We have some citations, and I'm sure the county has some citations as well. I'm not sure if you are reading the names. Right. Okay, great. So thank you all. Thank you for letting me be part of this.
Our next speaker has been in law enforcement for a long time. Spent a lot of years on the Anne Arundel County Police Department before he became elected as our sheriff. What I like about Sheriff Fredericks, he did a column in the Capitol talking about why it's important for the police or law enforcement and the community to work together, and how respect must be mutual, but how all police officers have to understand that every citizen have human dignity. Please join me in welcome to the podium, Sheriff James Fredericks.
Okay, it's hot out here, I know that, and I'll make my comments brief. Usually I'm a politician, so I talk a long time, and Stewart knows what I'm talking about, but we'll make this quick. So when I was elected to sheriff, one of the things, and I appreciate, Carl, what you said there, but I love the idea of celebrating the youth today and tonight, and that's what I want to do. And when we came to the sheriff's office, one of the things that we saw was that there was just a total lack of youth in the sheriff's office. They have a cadet program, which same as the police department, but we had one cadet. And one of the immediate things I did was I said, let's add more to that. So we now have 4 cadets. We hired the first African-American cadet in the history of the sheriff's office, and I'm proud to say that. But I'm also more proud to say that that he is moving on from us, and he will become an Anne Arundel County police officer into the academy starting in August. So that's a big thing for us. The other thing, Chief Jackson's not going to like this, but we will now have 4 vacant spots for our cadet program. And I'm happy to give a shameless plug for any 18 to 21-year-olds out there who want to come into the sheriff's office for a paid cadet position. And you can contact Carl, because we've already been talking about this. So one of the things, everybody in this crowd, I volunteered, Carl's a big community volunteer, and that's an important thing. But one of the issues is when I volunteer at church, at community, whatever it might be, it's always the same faces coming out over and over again. And anybody who's got a little bit of age on them like I do, you know that's the truth. You know, when we go to Appalachian Service Project, whether you're doing food pantry, no matter what it is, same faces over and over. One of the most exciting things to be able to come here to do tonight is to recognize that there are new leaders coming up in the community, new people who want change, new people who are bringing about change and driving that, being a driving force in that. That is something that, you know, when I'm doing volunteerism and I see a new person coming out there, a young person, it's exciting, there's new energy, it invigorates you, and I think that that's one of the things that we're here to celebrate tonight. So one of the easy things I can say is that when we volunteer, when we're active in the community, it's important for the wealth and health of the community that day. But when the youth step up into the leadership roles that they've done to bring about positive change and to drive that change, that's what helps us for tomorrow and into the future. And I'm proud to be here tonight and thankful for Carl for inviting me. So thank you.
Chief Jackson, we're going to ask you to come up and say a few words on behalf of the men and women in blue here in the city of Annapolis, the Annapolis Police Department. Please join me in welcome to the podium, Chief Ed Jackson.
Okay, don't worry about it. Okay, thank you, Mr. Snowden, I appreciate it. I can go back. Okay. Okay, that's a little insecurity, but I'm okay now. Good evening. I'll be brief. The times have changed, and I'll often argue that years before the Black Lives Matter movement or the unfortunate in-custody death involving George Floyd, long before that, I argued that police have to be trained and prepared to deal with social problems. The only way that a community is going to thrive, and the only way its citizens are going to feel good about its police, is that they have to know that the police care. Before they care about what police know, they need to know that police care. And I had a conversation with Carl earlier today, and I told him that my vision for the Annapolis Police Department is to take a more social approach to crime. In other words, police need to be at the table to talk about broken families. Police need to be at the table to talk about distressed neighborhoods. And what I mean by distressed neighborhoods are neighborhoods that are underserved. Police need to be at the table to talk about the disease of addiction, whether it be drugs or alcohol. The police need to be at the table to work with people who are suffering from trauma. And so it is a new day for law enforcement. It's a new day for law enforcement in Annapolis. As Mayor Buckley, his mantra has always been one Annapolis. And so as the police chief, it's an honor to be your police chief, number one. Number two, I'll end by saying that the way that the Annapolis Police Department is going to approach public safety is to treat everybody with the same dignity and respect that you should be treated with, regardless of what neighborhood you're from. And so I just want to thank you, Carl, again for giving me the opportunity to speak. Good evening. Yes, sir. Right here. This is good.
Before we bring up the honorees, I would like to ask people to take a moment and let's thank our police officers who provide an invaluable service. Let's give the police, law enforcement, a round of applause. The next part of this program is very significant. For me personally, and I know for many people watching tonight. Here's the scenario, here's how it's gonna work. When the young person's name is called, County Executive Pittman, you can come down on this side. He's gonna stand here, and the young person whose name is called is gonna stand next to Dr. King. And what's gonna happen is, there's gonna be a photograph taken of those individuals who are going to be honored. I saw a sign on television that moved me to write the column that the county executive had made reference to this morning. There were hundreds, probably thousands of demonstrations all over America. Not only over George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but it was a 27-year-old young man whose name was Rayshard Brooks, who was at a Wendy's, fell asleep, and unthinkable happened. In a matter of moments, he left 4 children behind. When I was reading about these young kids that he left behind, I took note of 3 of the names. 27 years old. He named his children Dream, she was 1. Memory, she was 2. And Blessings was 8. When I read those names, Dream, Memory, and Blessings, I imagine what he must have been thinking about when he named his children. On the day he died was the birthday of one of his daughters, which he had attended. Lots of people started marching and protesting. His death had come after George Floyd. But there was this sign that I read or saw on television. It struck me. And the sign just simply said this: blessing, dream, and memory, you have lost your father, but you've gained thousands of white brothers and sisters who will have your back. I thought that was highly significant that that sign would be held by one of the protesters who made the connection that all human life is valuable, and that when one person dies senselessly, we all lose something in that process. So when these young people began marching and demonstrating all over the county, the thing that has most impressed me are the ages. Some were as young as 12 and 13, some a little older, but all had this belief that we as a nation can be better than this, that we are a better people. And so the caucus decided that we wanted to honor some of these men and women who are participating. The next voice you will be hearing will be that of Dee Goodwin. We'll call each of the individuals up. Please, as your name is called, you'll get your citations from James Kitchen. And if you'll stand here, there'll be photographs taken. And I presume you will receive a special note from the county executive for having participated. Dee, are you ready?
Together, we are pleased to show our pride in the work each of the young men and women who have performed great work in our Anne Arundel County. And personally, I am proud because I noticed that you didn't wait and ask your elders, but you got up. You got up and you picked up the mantle and you began to lead the march to social justice. And because of that, today we salute you. So as Carl had mentioned, as I call each honoree's name, please step up to this side of the memorial. Okay, speak louder. Okay, okay. So the first honoree is Joy Anka Wod. I hope that's the correct pronunciation. Is Joy here? See, I didn't want to be that close to. See, where's the distance?
Our other sound man over here. There he goes.
This is just gonna. Okay, there you go.
I didn't want to let anybody else write this one, and I'm kind of proud of it, so I'm going to read it, okay? Executive citation: the citizens of Anne Arundel County, Maryland salute Joy Akinkwade in recognition of your leadership and your brave work, demanding justice and an end to the systemic racism that has crippled this county for far too long. Your willingness to speak out and to organize is creating a moment in this county's history that has the potential to finally deliver the opportunity and the justice to Black and brown people that has been denied here for centuries. You are strong, you are powerful, and you are making history. Thank you for helping to make Anne Arundel County the best place for all.
Okay, the next honoree is Shalea Brown. Shalea here? She's not here. Well, okay, Shalea was instrumental in organizing and leading the first protest in Pasadena, Maryland. And personally, I had the opportunity to attend that successful march where hundreds of people, young and old, attended. Very impressive. The next honoree is Kalia Buchanan. Is Kalia here? Kalia is a Meade High School student. Okay. Alderman Dewan Gay. I saw him somewhere. Dewan, I can't say enough about Dewan. I can't say enough, but I will just mention that he has been instrumental as an alderman. Even before that, I've been watching you. Yes, I've been watching you, have my eyes on you. And he was responsible for last night's resolution, R30, on the youth violence, declaring youth violence a public epidemic and supporting the establishment citywide trauma-informed education and response methods. So we applaud you. The next honoree is Erin Francis. Is Erin here? Okay. Well, Erin was a great help with the protests and rally in Russet, and he attends the University of Maryland. Next, Jontel Green. Where's that Jontel? Jontel, in my opinion, is an up-and-coming star who currently works for State Senator Sarah Elfert. And she's been very active in the community as well. Next is Hannah Hawthorne. Hannah, I am told, helped with the Crofton March. The Crofton, Maryland March. Thank you, Hannah. Next is Maren Hennick. Maren is responsible for helping to raise awareness on issues around police accountability and education equity. And Erin was also one of the organizers of the Russet March. She'd like to say a few words.
Hello everyone, can you guys hear me? Okay, I wasn't supposed to speak, but I have a lot on my chest, but I'll keep it brief. My name is Marin, I'm 19 years old, and I just want to announce and make it clear that the one thing that the future should be worried about and fearful about is our generation, the youth, because I promise we stand here today because we will not stop, we will not rest, and we will not comply, we will not obey until our revolution has been delivered. And I say that with confidence because we have much work to do and we are not done yet. And we are not even close to done yet. So, just wanted to make that.
Okay. The revolution will not be televised. It's going to be live. Thank you, Mary. Okay, the next honoree is Amelia Huntington. Is Millie here? No, okay. Well, Millie was one of the honorees, and she helped to plan the Juneteenth rally at Severandenza Park. And she is one of the founders of a grassroots organization called Organization of Protesting Students, OOPS. I believe she was also a part of the protest for the July 4th in Odenton. She's worked tirelessly and dedicated to the Black Lives Matter movement. The next honoree is Ayanna Johnson, and I don't believe that Ayanna is with us today. Oops. Okay. Rylan Cole. Rylan, thank you for all of the work that you have done in Anne Arundel County. We salute you. Thank you. So the next honoree is Zayana Kaka. Zayana also helped to raise awareness on issues around police accountability and education equity. Next, William Kelly. William is noted for stepping up to reach out to the Surge 3A accountability partners personally, while compiling incredible research on student resource officers and making big contributions to the Arundel Green Book and Divest worksheet, while handling challenging pushback online with Supreme calling intact. Thank you. Next is Harold Mo Lloyd, another up-and-coming superstar. Harold, or Mo as some refer to, is he's the owner of Superior Future, a nonprofit working with youth and low-income people. He's also involved in many of the protests that occurred in Annapolis.
So I wasn't going to talk at first, but Mr. Snowden here gave me permission. So I just want to hit on the points that, like, as she said earlier, she had it on spot. Like, the revolution is here. The revolution is now. You cannot stop our revolution. I'm trying to tell you, we're going to perfect this, and it doesn't stop here. Like, we are honored for these awards. Do not get me wrong, but we haven't even scratched the surface yet. We haven't even received the bare minimum yet. Like, we have to change the systemic racism that has flourished in our county for decades. And we're not going to neglect it anymore. We have delegates, we have aldermen, we have the youth in college, the youth in high school who are all behind us. And as Mr. Snowden said, in November, we are going to march to those polls and we're going to bring change and we're going to hold y'all accountable. So be scared, be aware. If you're not with us, please move out the way because we won't stop.
That revolution. Thank you. Okay, so the next honoree is Evan Marks. Is Evan here? No. Okay, Madison Medley. The next honoree is Nalia Mitchell. Nala's a student at Bowie State. Nala, did you have a couple of words you wanted to say?
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to take up too much of you guys' time, but I have to write it down because I'm a little nervous. My question to everybody is, how can we prevent a gang from perceiving African Americans and colored people as a threat? At the end of the day, I appreciate this award because it's allowing me to ask this question, but like Harold said, we do have a lot to do. And there are kids watching us. They're aware that the oppressors do have a lot of control. And the one thing that oppressors can't control is time. So the more that we protest and raise awareness, things are going to change. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you so much. The next honoree is DeJuan Moreland. Is DeJuan here? DeJuan, we appreciate all of the work that you have done in the community to uphold social justice. Okay, Megan Randby. Megan stepped up to personally contact accountability partners on the Civilian Review Board petition. She took the initiative to create a QR code and flyer to allow volunteers to garner petition signatures at events from a social distance. She's worked closely with the Surge group. And she also and she cultivated a connection between PG County organizers, protesting Annapolis and our accountability partners to get permission to get signatures during their event. Thank you, Megan. AJ Richardson. AJ? No. Okay, AJ played a huge role in the Pasadena March organized by Jalea Brown. Jared Rogers. Jared helped to raise awareness on the issues around police accountability and education equity also. And just as a side note, he is the wonderful son of Delegate Mike Rogers. Thank you. You have something? Okay. These young folk have things to say.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? So, I wasn't actually going to read this today, but since I'm up here, I might as well, since I have the platform to do so. So I actually wrote a poem while I was at Coastal Carolina in the fall for an assignment I had to do, and I would just like to read it for y'all today. It's called Bulletproof. My heart's heavy, I'm getting anxious. Yes, sir, officer, here's my license and registration. What seems to be the problem, is everything okay? I'm praying to God that I live to see another day. You didn't stop at the stop sign, but sir, I didn't see one. Get out the car and get on your knees because you are not going to play dumb. I'm sorry, sir, it must have been a misconception. But in reality, I'm apologizing for my skin complexion. It won't happen again, officer, I promise. Put your hands behind your head before this gets violent. I do exactly what he commands because I don't want to die. My mom's face flooded with tears because all she can do is cry. I look up to the sky hoping this isn't my last breath. I hear a quick noise. It sounds like a for sure death. It pierces through my back, yet it feels so smooth. I can hear the officer screaming, I told you not to move. I fall slowly to the ground. I've never felt this much weight. When I finally hit the gravel, it feels like an earthquake. Now I'm lying still, hoping people learn the truth. No matter how much I say, please don't shoot, the police will always think that I'm bulletproof.
Thank you, Jared. That was strong. Thank you. Okay, the next honoree is David Rattle. David collaborated with a conservative, older African-American who also lives in Edgewater, Maryland, Ron Lee, to host two powerful marches along Route 2 that ended at the Edgewater Police Station. Thank you, David. Drake Smith. Drake. We've got a lot of up-and-coming superstars here. Drake has been very active in Anne Arundel County. He is a member of the local branch of NAACP. He's a Meade High School student who was recently sworn in to become the 47th student member of the Board of Education of Anne Arundel County. Congratulations, Drake. Next, Keano Smith Brown. Keano was elected as a delegate for Bernie Sanders in his 2016 campaign. He's a former legislative aide for former Delegate Alice Kane. He's a former coordinator of student affairs for Ben Jealous. And he was the deputy campaign manager for Dewan Gay, Ward 6. So as you can see, he's been very involved in the community and politics. Kairi Stinson. Kairi participated in the County Executive's Town Hall recently. And when I tuned in, I was very impressed with her. Our young people or something. Thank you. And our last honoree is Micah Stevens, and she was unable to join us today. I believe she was out of town. But she too participated in some of the protests in Anne Arundel County. So would you please all stand and give the honorees a hand?
Let's give it another round of applause. We got one last young speaker. His name is Terrence White, and he promised me he was only going to take a couple minutes, but he felt he had something he wanted to say. Please welcome to the podium, Terrence White from Broadneck.
Hello, everyone. Is everyone doing good? Okay. So I wrote this speech. I was just thinking. And for a time, there are things that I didn't put to the forefront of my attention. But now I understand that I have the power, I have the platform, and I have the voice to speak about these things. So, today, I do not know, but I write. This world is in pain and suffering. Racism is alive. Not just alive. If this being was an animal, it would be grass-fed, organic, hormone, and antibody-free. Its size has grown to immeasurable proportions, far too disproportionate than what we can ever tolerate. This monster has gone unattended for generations, a behemoth that knows no regard. The only structures that we and our kids know to be true are dissolving in front of our eyes. What our state asks from us is unacceptable. You have to understand, COVID-19 is a luxury to fear. Every day people fear not being able to eat, not being able to bathe, not being able to breathe. It's time we stop listening to our leaders' lies and deceits, and for the conquerors to hold them accountable. Today is a day that we say no more to hate, no more to war, no more to fear. But more importantly, more moves to peace. But before we even get there, don't even mention prosperity. Send love to the heavens and put this great monster to hell.
Let's give him another round of applause. I want to acknowledge our County Councilwoman, Lisa. Let's give her a round of applause, Lisa Roger. I think the state senator was here earlier. Is she still here, Sarah? Let's give Sarah a round of applause. Here's where we are. For the people watching on Zoom and Facebook, the next few minutes, they will have an opportunity to have what's called interactive participation and those in the audience. And I want to set the tone as we go to the last portion of our program. For persons who are in the audience, if you had to choose a time in which you could be born, some people might have chosen to be born during an era when there were not planes, airplanes. Some people might have been chosen to be born during an era when life was so simple. Some people might have been chosen to be born, might have chosen to be born during an era when all life seemed to be so simple. But those of you in this audience and those who are listening are living in a period that we've never seen before. You're living in a period where we have great social upheaval. We have a pandemic. We have people demanding change. And so for the first time, we find ourselves with leaders. And this is where you come in. To be born during this period, to be a leader during this era, is like no other. The country's close to an economic collapse if certain things don't go the way it should. Programs must continue to run. Revenue is down. Great challenges. So elected officials that's in office today, Amy, they're faced with some real challenges. Leadership has a way of having people rise to the occasion or be swallowed up by it. That's the era that we live in. The people listening tonight and the people in the audience get an opportunity to ask our elected officials any questions they want. These are not predetermined questions. So we've asked the county executive and the mayor, who both have agreed that they will take any questions from any audience on any subject. And so we're going to first give people in the audience, young people, if you have a question that you would like to ask your county executive, your mayor, you've been dying to ask the question, now is the time. John, is this the mic that people should come to? So anybody in the audience who have a question, please go to the mic here to ask the first question, and then we're going to alternate between Facebook, Zoom, and this microphone. Anybody have a question? Mr. County Exec and Mayor, would you come up so we can move this quickly? Come on, leaders. Folks, come on now. Here you have an opportunity to ask any question you want. Do we have any member of the audience who would like to ask a question of our county executive or our mayor? Meanwhile, John, if you cue me up for the question that's coming off Facebook or from Zoom, we'll go to that question. Yes, ma'am. There we are. Oh, that fire I saw you earlier. And is it directed to both or either one?
Either one, whoever can answer it.
Oh, good. Go right ahead.
Okay, hello. My name is Erin. I went to school in Anne Arundel County. I went to Meade High School, and I think it's very clear that de facto segregation within the schools are very evident in terms of where the funding goes to and what schools it goes to, in terms of if Severna Park gets more funding than Meade High, or Chesapeake gets more funding than North County. These are predominantly black schools that don't get enough attention, resources, and aid that we need. So what's going on? What's the next steps, and what are the next plans that might unfold before us to help that issue?
Thank you very much. I think the county executive.
Yeah, we fund the schools. We don't run them, but I don't know if we have any school board members here, but I agree with you that even though they have formulas that make it look like things are equitable, the way that the system is set up, we have school construction programs and school rehabilitation, the capital improvements program for schools. And in the past, they've certainly bumped some schools up ahead of some other schools, that I think where the schools that got bumped up might have been in the neighborhoods where those elected officials felt like their base was, and those were white neighborhoods that had more money. I'm really glad that Meade High School is going to get rebuilt. The money's finally there. It's on its, it's the next in line, and they're going to be breaking ground in 2021. But, and I think part of it is that we got to be more proactive about where the teachers go. And we used to have a program where teachers were paid a little bit extra if they were in schools that had higher poverty levels, and that program doesn't exist anymore. And I know that's hurt Annapolis in particular. There's a lot of things that I think we could do in the schools, and one of the big ones is community schools, where we have health and community coordinators that work in the schools, and we've only got 2 of those in the county. We're going to get that up to 10, I believe, and we need to do more of that. And we need to have more counselors, and we need to have just more proactive work to help the students that are falling behind. And the opportunity gap that we've task force has kind of not done its work yet. It was organized this year between the school system and county government with a bunch of people that were appointed to that who were really excited when we got started. Then COVID happened and it slowed down. So we've assigned somebody to kick that back into gear, and we'll have a report on that by October. And we just got to do a whole lot more. Got to do a whole lot better.
Thank you so very much. I overlooked Delegate Dana Jones. Let's acknowledge Delegate Dana Jones.
Carl,
This is a question coming from Zoom or Facebook. John.
yeah, this is a question from the audience. Should police officers be in schools? Should police officers be in schools?
Is that directed to anyone or both?
No, it's to anyone who wants to take it.
I think we need retraining. You know, police officers are not trained properly in mental health issues and different societal problems that they need to be prepared for to do their job properly. So, yeah, there should be some different type of training, some different type of schooling, so that we can have a different approach to policing. And that approach is, you know, building a trust in the community that they serve. We're all moving in that direction. It's an important thing. It's at the root of most of our problems now, a lack of understanding, and a lack of understanding of young people and respect for young people. So we need to make those relationships strong. We're working on that really hard, and I promise you change under these administrations. Thank you.
I would not have put them there to begin with if I had been asked if they weren't there. In Anne Arundel County, they are there now. And some of the officers that are working in our schools are, I think, some of our very best cops. And the training that they get to work in the schools, I think, is some of the best training that our cops get. They've taken our training program and used it statewide for the SROs. They were put in the schools to protect the kids from outside assault. There is a big debate over how much they should be doing in terms of discipline within the schools. Our police chief says they are being put into positions they shouldn't be put in, and that's where we have to work. And I think our school system and our police department want to make sure that our police officers are not the discipline, they're not the educators. They're there to support, but they shouldn't be going in and taking kids who are getting in an argument and getting in a fight and then putting them into the criminal justice system, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
We're going to alternate between audience and Facebook. So, audience, go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Reverend Morris. I have a question for both. In reference to civilian review boards, which are independent organizations that can hear both sides of a complaint when there's an issue with police accountability, what are the two of your stand on it and why in reference to civilian review boards in our community?
Thank you, Reverend Morris.
I just want to go back to that last question. I misunderstood it. Sorry. On the Civilian Review Board, when we interviewed 100 people to choose the police chief of this city, one of the main questions that came up, and there was a lot of people in the community that helped us select the last 2 candidates for our police chief. That was the #1 question. Do you support a Civilian Review Board? So the city and the county are moving in that direction, but it can't be, we understand, it has to be built from the ground up from the community. It has to have some objectivity on it. And so we know what has not worked and what we're going to do is going to work. And you will see that the fruits of that very soon. Thank you.
I said for a long time no in Anne Arundel County when I was asked this question. I asked advice from some people who told me that in Maryland, you set up a civilian review board and it raises expectations that people are going to have the ability to make decisions that by state law they can't make. and you raise expectations. I was concerned also that if a civilian review board was appointed by the wrong county executive, it might be the wrong civilian review board, and that organizations that would normally have a voice would be pushed down because the civilian review board would be speaking for them. I've come around on that, and I spent 3 hours talking to a group of people in our police department, the leadership, about all of the community engagement work that we do, how decisions get made about when there are complaints against officers, and the whole system from top to bottom, and that we're continuing to look at the whole system. Our department's done some great things in the last 5 years and improved the policing, improved the training. We have not done the civilian review piece, and I believe that we can do this in a way that works for Anne Arundel County. We have to be very careful about who's involved in it, the training that they get, and changes in state law are going to change what a civilian review board does. We have community review boards in each, not review boards, we have community organizations in each district, and then we have a citizens advisory committee to the police chief and a business advisory committee. We need to create a new form of citizen engagement, and it's going to be, it's going to be our version of a civilian review board. We got to have that conversation about what works best.
John, next question from Zoom and Facebook.
The question is, what are the top 3 initiatives that you think should be taken to work in this area for improvement, and how do you plan to fund them?
Anybody understand this question? What area? Yeah.
In the areas related to these protests, what we're protesting about, presumably it's the sorts of questions that we've been asking.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that we've got to connect with young people, and one of the problems in the Annapolis City Council is only older people can afford to do the job. So there's no young voices except for Alderman Gay. Thank you for arriving. I mean, there's young people, but a real young voice is what we've needed for a long, long time. And I said to Alderman Gay when he was running, I said, we know what it's like for young people. If you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. I think that's one of Carl's sayings, but it's so true. Young people have to be shaping policy. So it's so exciting to see this many young people stepping up, because they're going to affect change, and we're all going to have to do it together. And so, it's no good me telling you what's the best idea. I need to hear from you, and Steuart needs to hear from you, and we are hearing loud and clear, and change is happening. We didn't just start doing this stuff after George Floyd. We've started doing this from the moment we stepped into office. Using an equity lens to deal with every single situation in the city is the most important thing to actually truly get to justice. Thank you.
So I want to say something about economic justice, because I think a lot of this all comes down to money. And it may not be very popular, but I've been saying, and I'm going to continue to say, and I'm going to continue to fight for progressive taxes so that there are resources that we can invest in communities. We have cut the tax rate for the wealthiest Americans by half since 1980, when Ronald Reagan was elected. And we're in a position now where there's a lot of money. There are a lot of people in this society who have done well even in this economy. And if we don't tax them, we're not going to have the revenue to be able to do the health equity and racial justice work that we're doing in our health department, and to provide the assistance right now that we need. We're about to hit this cliff where the eviction ban on renters is going to be lifted in this pandemic, and people aren't going to have what they need. They're going to be homeless if we don't provide resources. Basic income, $15. We're fighting for $15 an hour. People don't make enough money to live on, and so to me, we have to confront the hard economic issues that have been holding communities back, holding Black and brown communities back more than any other, and we have to be brave enough as politicians to fight for that.
Okay. Steuart, this one's for you. This is texted. The original question was to County Executive Pittman. Now that the health officer said it's time to act regarding racism as a public health issue, what are the top 3 initiatives that will be started by you, and when and what funding will be made available to ensure the success of these initiatives? Steuart?
So the declaration of racism as a public health issue, we followed that out by creating an Office of Health Equity and Racial Justice that we're about to hire for. In fact, the job has just been posted. If you're interested, I heard of one person today who's going to apply. Part of that is taking data and looking at the racial impact of policy. One of the things that we're going to start doing, I hope to have this started by the first of the year, is every piece of legislation that goes to the county council will have a health impact and racial justice note attached to it, so that team will work with the rest of county government and identify what the impact will be. So we talk about looking at policy through a racial equity lens, but we're actually going to have it on paper so that anybody who cares about that issue can look at that and see what that impact is going to be. In terms of the budget, we have to do the same thing. We have to look at the health impact and racial justice impact of everything in our budget. And there are countries that are starting to do that. New Zealand is doing that on health impact of the budget. And so we have to look at our whole budget through that lens. And I'd say that the place where we probably have to put the money that's the most expensive right now and the least popular in this county probably is in affordable housing. So we can't just talk about a fair housing bill and a workforce housing bill there's two other bills. We're going to create a housing trust fund and a requirement that developers set aside a certain number of affordable units. But we actually have to put money there, and we have to make a plan for creating the units that we need and do simple math to make it happen.
Thank you, sir. The next question, Tony.
Good evening. This is for Mr. Mayor and Mr. County Executive. In the midst of a pandemic, we had an epidemic called a drug crisis. I don't call it an opioid crisis because all drugs are considered drugs. Opioids, crack, alcohol. So in the midst of a pandemic, we were dealing with the epidemic. The latest results in the city shows that the fatal overdoses and non-fatal overdoses has increased in the midst of a pandemic. The county shows a different story. What are you doing as our leaders and our elected officials to ensure that the people that are overdosing fatally and non-fatally in our communities are being protected during the pandemic?
So you know very well we work, Tola Ajay in our office, started the Naptown anti-dope movement, brought resources into the community, went into every one of these communities that's been affected so heavily by the drug disease of drug addiction. We have been in those communities on a regular basis. We have Alderman Gay, Alderman Pindell Charles, working on different initiatives towards treatment. We hope you are helping us on that. So this city understands that's one of the big health crises of the city and that we have to do something about it, and we are putting money into it as we speak. Thank you.
So when I brought in our new health officer, Dr. Kalia Buchanan, one of the things that I asked him even before I brought him in was, what do you think about the opioid crisis? And is that one of the top priorities? It was the main focus of the health department in Anne Arundel County before. And he said what I wanted to hear, which is that it's not just opioids. In fact, there are other drugs that are becoming more prevalent, and there is a racial component to that. If you talk about just opioids, you're talking about primarily white folks. And there was a crack epidemic and there was a war on drugs. I mean, you know that perfectly well. And so we have to treat all of these addictions and all of these drugs with the same kind of service and the same kind of compassion that we've been using for opioids, and the same kind of access to treatment on demand when people are ready to go into rehab, and we have to make that available. You heard a lot about the safe stations before. We've actually expanded that so you don't have to go to a fire station to get help. You can actually just call the warm line and they'll meet you anywhere in the community and provide the help. And then we have our crisis response teams that are in collaboration between the police department and mental health and they got an award yesterday for being the best in the world. They got for crisis response teams. It's one of the best things that our police department does. One of the best things our county does, I think. And they follow up, so they go back to people and they check back up on people, because it's you're in treatment, you're out of treatment. It's a cycle, and it goes on and it goes on, and it takes patience, it takes compassion, and we just have to treat all the other addictions and drugs the way we've treated opioids, and I think we'll make some progress.
Okay, are there any other questions from either Zoom or Facebook? Zoom has a question. Why don't you ask your question, sir? And is it directed to one or both?
Both.
Okay.
Whoever it's really can deal with it better. I don't mean to harp on the whole schools education issue, but you folks were all saying earlier that like the youth, we're the leaders, we're the people who need to come up and create change for our community. And I just want to know what you guys can do different to help our education system, specifically the schools in the southern part of the district, where systemic racism and frankly blatant racism is almost rampant. There can be kids yelling explicitives in the hallways and not getting in trouble, not being held accountable. So what can you guys do to make sure that the officials, the administrators and teachers for these schools can hold these kids accountable and be held accountable themselves?
I'm gonna let the county executive respond to that, since it's in the southern part of the county.
When we had in February we had the hate bias. We had the most hate bias incidents in the state. We've had a lot of them in this county, in the state of Maryland. We had the highest percentage, the highest numbers, and so one of our responses to that was the Human Relations Commission did a big event in February at Community College about hate crimes and bias. And before the event, I met with about 15 or so kids from high schools around the county, just to ask questions, and that was one of the most, in a way, it was one of the most painful things, because the racism in schools is so vicious, and people say stuff that it was shocking to hear some of it. On the other hand, the kids are open and honest about talking about it, and kind of gave me some hope. So I think we need the young people to be at the forefront of the conversation. And we're doing this youth advisory committee. We just put out advisory to the county executive to tell me what's going on in the schools, what's going on in the communities, and what we should be doing about it. And I'm thrilled to say we got 116 applications for 19 seats. So we're gonna have to do something with all the others that we don't have room on the actual commission for. But I have felt like a lot of this has to be student-led to get as far as we need to get, because when the grown-ups are saying to the kids, don't say racist things, it's not as effective as when the students do it. And I think the students are ready to demand an end to the racism in the schools, and we have to figure out how to do that. And I know that our Opportunity Gap Task Force and our Mental Health Task Force both are having to confront that same issue. What can we do legally? How can the school system discipline in a way that people know the discipline happened? It's been one of my complaints always, is you don't know whether that student had paid any consequences. And that's a legal issue that I've been complaining about, and we have to struggle with as well.
Carl, I have a question. Yes, sir. We're going to take about 4 more questions before winding this down.
This is a two-part question. The first one is, given that the county has backlogs in its rental assistance program, do you plan to ask Governor Hogan for any assistance? The second part of the question is, what is the county going to be doing to help people who are getting out evicted during the COVID crisis? And I'll add a personal note. We were trying to help someone who's here in the county but not eligible because they moved here recently, and it's really a tricky situation.
Yeah, our Arundel Community Development Services was quick to develop a program for rental assistance to prevent eviction in the pandemic, and we set aside $5 million to get started. It's a program that other counties are now following up and doing as well, and Kathy Koch has been advising those counties. It includes a lot of counseling so that the landlord's at the table, and if we get to the point where that person they're trying to evict we're working on getting legal assistance for those folks. So the answer on the state is $5 million is not enough. We're going to have to add more when that $5 million is gone. The state, for the whole state, has $20 million, and they just announced that just last week, I think it was. We've been pushing the governor and pushing the governor. I and all the county executives in Central Maryland have been pushing Governor Hogan on eviction prevention and doing the counseling. It was done under the O'Malley administration in the last recession. We can do it again. It's not been a priority of this administration. So we're pushing that. And direct cash assistance too. We just announced Monday, people can get $500 debit cards now from Workforce Development if they've been excluded. We call it the Excluded Worker Humanitarian Fund, if they can't get unemployment insurance. So it's about keeping a roof over people's head and keeping them fed, because we are hitting this cliff, and unemployment insurance is going to be cut, the eviction ban is going to be lifted, and it's a dangerous time.
Is there a question in the audience? Yes, sir. And who you want to direct it to? One or both? Okay, go right ahead.
This is a municipal and county issue that I feel strongly about. I'm the proud father of Madison Medley, one of the recipients this evening. One of the ways Madison and I talk about is the way racial injustice manifests itself. And one of the ways it manifests itself is through the digital divide. And these times when online access is critical, we were wondering, are there any initiatives or programs that will make access to equipment and infrastructure to those who are not able to take advantage? Because it impacts them in online school, access to online services, and in some cases, access to online employment opportunities. So I was wondering, from a municipal and county perspective, what initiatives were in place?
Well, I can say I just toured the new library, Steuart, and there is amazing access there. So there is a lot of digital resources at a new reimagined library that is accessible to everyone in this city. We worked really hard in the mayor's office to make sure everybody had Chromebooks and access to computers during this time. I know Steuart has put a lot of resources into that, but we recognized it took this disease to recognize how bad the divide was, and how some people are going to succeed during this time because they have access, they have internet access. So I know it's going to be a priority for this administration. Alderman Gay talks about it all the time. So we have to try to close that gap.
Yeah, we've just installed at all the libraries in the county about football field around the library. You can get access, so you can drive up at all hours and log in, and people are starting to use that. We've got a committee that was really formed by our Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families, which is our organization that fills the gaps when things aren't happening, and works with local community groups. They're fantastic. Unfortunately, the governor's just announced that he's going to balance the budget on their backs and cut their funding this year. But they have a group that's been working to supplement what the school system does, and has been providing Chromebooks. So we've been funding that through our CARES Act money to get more Chromebooks out into the hands of people who need them. And I think we have to go further. You know, there are these programs with Comcast where they provide free service for a while, but we have to make sure that it's not just a way to catch you later and charge you a lot of money. But we have to take the next step, I believe, and get internet that's accessible at public housing and other affordable housing apartment buildings, because that's where you can reach a lot of people with one signal. And I think that's the next step that we have to move on.
Last question from the Zoom folks.
Directed towards Steuart. Do you plan to put a ban on chokeholds?
Yes, we've been going round and round in circles about this, because the police department says, well, we have a ban on chokeholds. That if an officer uses a chokehold, it's like pulling out your gun and shooting somebody. It's considered deadly force. So then we say, well, in addition to that, is there something we can do? Because it's reviewed, but does that really mean it's banned? And so it's sort of a semantic thing, and we're looking at, I have staff looking at what's going on in other countries where they're, quote, banning chokeholds and what that means. We don't train it. Officers get punished for using it. They get investigated for using it. The question is, what does that really mean, and how does that work in practice?
All right. Follow question from the audience, if there is one.
3 of us.
Alderman.
It's 3 of us now.
3 of them. All right. Let's just see if we can get all 3 questions at the same time.
I'll make mine
Let's do
very
it.
fast.
Come on, all 3. So you can ask one after the other, and then I have them all respond.
Yeah.
You got the first.
Awesome, thanks. Mine's primarily for Stewart. I can't question my boss.
No problem.
I'm just wondering.
No, I guess it's for both of you, though. So at the core of so many arrests for African Americans, and particularly young African Americans, is marijuana. And even though we've decriminalized and we've kind of moved away from that, even with the fines now, they amount to court cases, or people aren't able to pay and then they lose their license, they lose just so there's this slippery slope. And a very simple fix is that both of you as policymakers and as heads of your police departments make it so that they don't arrest simply for possession of marijuana, or that they don't arrest for possession of marijuana on private property. If you're on your private property and you're smoking, you shouldn't be arrested. Is that something that both of you could commit to? It's a little easier for me to work with Gavin and make that happen. But Stewart, is that something that you would be open to committing to in the next year?
I support legalizing, but that has to get done at the state level.
Yeah, that's
and
at a state level.
They can't arrest anybody, and it's been, quote, decriminalized. So I guess your question is, would I tell the police
to completely just look away from it and allow people to act as if it's a legalized drug?
I may have a conversation about that. I've never actually thought about that.
Yeah, I'd be
I'll talk
open to definitely discussing that with you.
Yeah.
Ron, talk to me too.
I mean, it's criminal that we fill our prison system with people for simple drug charges. There are other ways to resolve these situations, and there's too many young lives that get wasted because they're put in prison for simple things, or they have records and they can't get employment because of these stupid things that are on their records. So we are working to turn that around.
How you doing? In regards to the affordable housing, I think first we need to come up with a working definition of what's affordable housing. And my question is, will the affordable housing be conducive to the living wage that we are getting? Because I see a lot of affordable housing that go up and it's still not attainable based on the living wage that people that look like me.
I agree 100%. We have to create affordable housing. We have really, I believe, good opportunities. We have an opportunity site on Spa Road. There was a site we're looking at on Forest Drive next to the Legion. When we rebuild all the public housing in the city that needs reinvestment in, that is a massive opportunity there to create true affordable housing. Because if we don't get affordable housing, we lose young people. And so if you don't have young people in your town affecting the agenda, if they can't afford this town and they leave us, then we're a much poorer community for it. So you know it will be a priority for us to make sure that we come up with something that truly is affordable. Whether it's micro units or whatever, we just need to bring a number in that is realistic for the wages in this country, because wages don't match up with the cost of housing here. And not only that, there should be programs for acquiring housing, programs that get people into home ownership. We know that is the #1 wealth builder in this country, and we have to make that a priority, and I know Stewart will be, I will be as well, whatever I can do.
Yeah, I mean, the definition of affordable is the broad word, and then there's 80% of median income. There's 100% of median income, $100,000. There's 60%, there's 40%, there's 30%, and different programs have different standards, state and federal programs for how that works. And then there's various groups within all of that. And what we have to do is look at the cost burden. They say nobody should be paying more than 30% of their income on housing, right? In Anne Arundel County, half the renters are paying more than 30% of their income on housing, and there isn't even enough housing for the people at the lower end. And so we have to do the production for the people that we know what they're making in Anne Arundel County. I think they need to be making more. You know, we've got $11 minimum wage. We're going to get to 15 if they don't slow it down on its way up at the state level. Use this economy to slow it down, which is the wrong thing to do. But when we get it up to 15, it's going to mean that people, it's based on cost burden. But we have to have programs for every different level, or else we got people living on the streets.
A serious question is that what we do here is we don't think that a lot of situations that we see on the national level will come to our city and to our county. And what's been bothering me a lot is the Breonna Taylor situation. And as they mentioned earlier, how do you feel about banning chokeholds? But also, how do we feel on the city council, the city level and the county level to ban no-knock warrants? Because I refuse to let one of my sisters pass away just how Breonna Taylor passed away. I don't want to lose any kings and queens in that type of situation. So what are we doing to prevent that in the future on the city and county level?
Okay. I should mention, just to let you know, this is not unusual. There's cities that have banned no-knock warrants as a result of what happened. A lot of cities have now taken this on as reform.
Yeah, I think what has happened with this situation, it's all about police reform. I can tell you, I didn't really know what a no-knock warrant was. This is news to me. I've never heard of it before. But what happened was obviously a travesty. It should never have ever happened. Excessive force shouldn't be tolerated. It won't be tolerated with this new police chief. I pray that nothing like that ever happens, because it won't be legal if it does in the city of Annapolis.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where they start talking in legalese really quick. When you start saying, they say, oh, we don't do no-knock warrants unless A, B, C, D. And the warrants are, of course, given by the court system. But then the question is what the police department or the sheriff's office does with those warrants. And that's something that we're digging into, too. I mean, we've got the list of the 8 items that nationally have been going around that people are saying this is police reform. And, you know, the answer we get is, well, we're doing all of those, but let's look into a little bit deeper at what that really means, that we don't have no-knock warrants and that we don't do chokeholds and that we have community engagement but not civilian review. So I don't think we should be doing no-knock warrants either. And we got to figure out how to prevent them from happening.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. 2 final questions.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, my name is Dewan Moreland. I went to Meade High School. I just graduated last year. And my question is, what are your plans to address sorry, I'm nervous. What are your plans to address the school-to-prison pipeline that's still present in Anne Arundel County, and especially for Black communities?
I'm going to ask Steuart to respond.
Well, part of it is making sure that our SROs in our schools are not contributing to that pipeline, but slowing that pipeline down. And there are programs that we have in our school system, in our court system, that work when they're implemented, but we know that it doesn't always work. So the opportunity gap and the proposals, when I came in, Carl and many other people told me, look, NAACP had a deal with the school system of Anne Arundel County that they were going to close the achievement gap. We're calling it opportunity gap now, same thing. And it's completely failed. It's not, you know, make a few little progress one or 2 years and not enough other years. And so I said, okay, well, we're going to get everybody together and we're going to make a plan. You know, we're going to dig in, get the educators, the community people together and make a plan. That's supposed to be out in October. And we're going to have to prioritize the funding for whatever they recommend. And I don't know what the answers are going to be yet.
Mr. Mayor, you actually got
Yes, sir. We've got a new program on recidivism. Sorry, that is something that has to be addressed. People that come out of the prison system, they have to have opportunities, or they're going to go back in again. So we definitely are making a priority out of that. But we are not going to fix anything until we fix the school system. We cannot have our school system reflecting the prison system. It can't be Latino gangs and African American gangs and white supremacists. This has got to stop. So until we make our schools, reimagine our schools, until we stop thinking that, you know, college is for everybody, until we have good trade programs, until we have other options when it comes to learning, we're still going to see the same problems. I'm not in charge of the school system, but my son goes to Annapolis High and Annapolis Elementary, so I know the school system, but I see the disparities when I'm there, and we have to all work together to change that.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm back again. I know that we carry so much weight and we depend on officers a lot to handle and fix our societal problems. But I want clarification on how thoroughly these officers are trained to handle situations like domestic violence or mental health issues to these people on the streets who need these help. Like, like how can we feel confident and okay that these officers are experts and trained in these situations?
I would say one of our highest priorities is de-escalation, to understand situations and not use excessive force. So that has been the problem. We have militarized our police instead of humanizing them. But the police have to be humanized because they're just regular people. They have families, they have mortgages, they have the same sort of things. But also the kids that they're addressing or the young people they're addressing, they have to understand the circumstances that people are in front of them are in. And you can't make that decision in a split second. You have to take some time to get to know people. That's why we are going to make a priority of our community policing. That's why there are more police on bikes in this town than there's ever been on police, because it's a bit more human than a drive-by. I came into office and the first thing that people were telling me was like, well, you have to do a drive-by at night just to see the situation. And I said, I door knock in these communities on my own. I'm not going to go in the back of a police car because that sends the wrong message. So getting police out of their cars and getting them to know people in the community, just like the old days when you kind of knew the name of your local police officer, we have to get back to that place. And I know the officers want to do it as well. We do a lot of camps and a lot of things, and we want to continue those relationships. And I think the gap, the lost generation is that sort of teenage generation where we give the resources to the younger generation, but we're not putting enough into teenagers and just above that. So we have to do that, sir.
Having officers understanding mental health issues is really, really, really important. And it's training in the academy, and they have classes on that they're supposed to come out of the academy and know, but that only really helps the young officers that are coming out. And I have talked to a lot of the young officers coming out of our academy and been really impressed by their whole outlook on policing and public service. They're basically understanding doing social work in the community. But this crisis intervention team that we have, which is a mix of mental health professionals working with officers who've been trained in mental health that go in and deal with the difficult situations. They're in our department anyway. I don't know if others do this. They're training all the officers. So they're all learning what they call, it's a program called Mental Health First Aid, so that officers understand, have some training, some at least laypersons training on mental health issues, so that they look at a situation through that lens. And then they have their fair and impartial policing training that they do every year as well. And then they pick a topic. Last year it was LGBTQ. They've gone to the Museum of African American History in DC for 10-hour days where they go there and they really learn about African American history. And they just keep putting the officers through these programs, and it's a constant ongoing process that we have to get better and better at and keep improving the programs. It's training. And getting rid of officers that don't get it, which we do as well.
Thank you. One of the Facebook Zoom people wanted me to share with the county executive. They were more raised the question of what No Knock wants that is real. They wanted me to remind the county executive that here in Anne Arundel County, a 26-year-old black pregnant woman by the name of Crystal Nelson in Severn, Maryland, died because of a no-knock warrant. So that this is not something that is not applicable to the city of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. It does happen. I was also told to remind the mayor, and this happened before Steuart or Gavin became in a public office, but it's important for people to know the history. There's a young man whose name is Cochise Daltrey, who was shot and killed in Annapolis by a police officer who many felt at the time of his death it was unfair. Cochise was trying to break up a fight, Leslie, and the police officer assumed that he was involved in the fight and shot and killed him. That was some years ago, but people who live in the Robinwood community remember Cochise, Daltrey. On this past Sunday, all of us was at an event where a young man was stabbed to death. And the community came out in great numbers. And from what I heard, observed, and saw, what the community was simply saying was, we want a just society where there's justice for everybody. Very simple. As we move to the conclusion, I want to leave the audience that's listening by Facebook, as well as Zoom, and those of you in this audience, with the following challenge, and it's a huge one. I have come to the conclusion after my many, many years of being involved in community, there are things that government can do, and there are things that government cannot do. What we need to do is hold government and elected officials responsible for the things they can do. And there are a lot of things government can do. Being a former elected official, worked in government at the county and state level, I understand what government can do and how important government is. But there's another part that is equally important, and that is what we as a community can do. There are some things that we collectively as a community can do. It is not, in my humble opinion, the government's responsibility to raise our children. That's our responsibility. And there are things that we as a community need to do as we move forward. In November, I cannot emphasize this enough. In November, we're at this very important crossroads. It literally will mean where we go as a nation. Whether we continue to be polarized and divided, or whether we try to heal the nation and bring people back together. This summer, I ask young people in this audience, those of you who have been leaders, to participate in this great march that's going to take place in November. There has been a prediction that's been made regarding you, young people. The political pundits are saying that when it comes to young people and voting, they won't show up in great numbers. You young people must change that analysis, and you can. If we can increase young people participation by a mere 15%, we can change the political climate in this country. But it requires young people to be involved. This summer, I hope people will use the energy, begin to register their friends, get them involved, and I hope they will use Dewan Gay as a model. If you don't like the way government is operating, you don't like the way it is going, please offer yourself up to public office. Be one of the candidates running to help change America, because we need you. We desperately, desperately need you. I close with thanking CJ, who helped to give us some of the names of the people tonight. I thank Linda Davis, who was also part of this effort. Thanks to Jackie Alsop and the NAACP, who also helped provide us names of individuals who got involved. The truth of the matter is that those we honored tonight are just a few of the many. There are a lot of young people who engage or involved. At 15 years old, I had the unpleasant experience of becoming an organizer at a very young age. By the time I was 16, I had an FBI file because of my activity in terms of getting involved in the community. But I look back on those days and I thank God for giving me that experience at such a young age. I learned the importance of getting involved in government. Over to my right is a lady who's way over on the right. It was too hot for her to be in the sun. Her name is Eliza May Robinson. For the young people who don't know her, she's 88 years old. Here's her claim to fame, living in our community. She organized one of the longest rent strikes in the history of the state of Maryland. It went 18 months. The rent strike she organized here in Annapolis went longer than the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, which went 361 days. You've got people in this community who are elders who really do understand the importance of people getting involved, keeping government in its perspective, making sure that civic activism is part of the strategy. Understanding that government responds best when, as Steuart Pittman often says, we hold them accountable. You've got to hold people accountable. And one of the ways of doing that is election. Mrs. Robinson asked me to put this commercial in for her, and I will. She's sitting over to your right, and if you don't have any opportunity but to go by and just simply say, thank you. Thank you for your 88 years. Thank you for being part of this community that we dedicated tonight. She happens to be selling some buttons that says Black Lives Matter. But if you as young people will take the moment before you go home, go over to see an elderly black woman who is so much a part of the history of this community. And if you say nothing else to her other than thank you, it will mean a great deal. Martin Luther King Jr. once said the following. He said, it's important that we understand we must keep the struggle going. Dr. King said, if you cannot run, walk. Dr. King said, if you can't walk, crawl. But for God's sake, keep the movement moving. And I'm just so happy that young people today is keeping the movement moving. For those of you who want to get photographs with the county executive and the mayor, when this breaks up, they'll both be around. The sheriff is here for those who are interested. The back wall will be done for that purpose. Please come up and participate in this great democracy that we have. Please join me in thanking our elected officials, the sheriff, the county executive, and Mayor Buckley. And for our viewing audience, we thank you for tuning in.